While this was almost 16 years ago, I still remember every single detail about this encounter vividly. It was so random and so distinctly bizarre that I'm never going to forget what happened. For some background, I'm 20 years old at the time of this, and after visiting some friends in college for the weekend, I found myself travelling home, alone, and taking a late night train from Boston out to the suburbs where my car is. I'm running late and very concerned that I'm going to miss the last subway of Boston. But, gratefully, the train I needed pulled up fast. I remembered being annoyed at myself for creating stress with such an unnecessarily close call, as I was definitely on the very last or next to last train out of Boston. And while I have friends I could have stayed with, I still had to do work the next morning, and my phone is fully dead. The ride is long and slow, and there is hardly a soul on the train after we leave the immediate Boston area, which isn't odd seeing how it's Sunday and after midnight. Halfway through the 45-minute ride, I doze off and jerk awake at hearing the blaring Braintree announcement. This is my last stop. In my foggy state, I grab my bag and jump off the train, and the moment I realise I'm at the wrong stop, the doors close. Turns out, they were just announcing the train destination, not the train stop. As you can imagine, I'm feeling pretty lousy about this watching the train plod off in the direction I needed it to go. I'm the only person to get off the train. The station is unfamiliar and utterly deserted. Quickly, I realise I'm in Quincy, 3 long stops away from my destination, and I'm feeling screwed. I really need the other train to be there. I look around. I realise I'm close to the end of a desolate and strikingly dark outdoor train platform. While the chances for there being another train is extremely slim, it's my only hope, and I begin to feel panicked, stupid, and vulnerable. After a minute or two of standing there dumbfounded and triple checking that my phone was dead, I suddenly spot a man standing along a light, a distance down the long and thin platform. A little ways further beyond him appears to be the only exit/entrance. That's unless there's some stairs going into the terminal halfway down that I can't see. Now, while the man makes me feel a little nervous, he's clearly facing the tracks, which gives me hope that one last train is on its way. I decided to just quietly sit on the bench close by and chose to stay unnoticed and in the dark while I wait. The bench is partially closed. While I sit down, I'm basically partially obscured from my shoulders down by deep shadows, and can still see in every direction but not directly behind me. A quick glance around it confirms that I'm definitely alone here. So on the dark bench I sit and wait and feel uncomfortable. With my wearing dark clothes, and it being so dark at the end of the station, I have the opportunity to rather blatantly watch the man at the end of the platform. The well-lit man is tall, thin, seems to be in his 30s, has light shaggy hair, and is dressed casually. He's strange though. Standing abnormally still, he's looking straight ahead in a weird way. Something's off, but he's minding his business, and probably doesn't even know that I'm there. And while I feel really uneasy, I do find some light comfort in being certain that nobody's down here with me, and can only partly be seen because of my darkness. After watching for a few minutes, the man begins to rock a little, placing weight on one foot then the other. He then takes a few slow steps towards the end of the platform. I notice that he's using a white and red walking cane for the visually impaired. He's tapping and feeling his way as he walks forward. Suddenly, I'm relieved, as this may explain his posture. Just as I'm feeling more relaxed, the feeling vanishes. He's still walking towards the platform edge, and quickly I stiffen and sit up, looking intently. He makes it to the bright yellow, raised metal warning thread that is at the edge of the platform. It's only a foot wide, and directly before an 8-foot drop onto electrified train tracks. He stops there, banging his cane against the edge, toes literally at the furthest point. I stand up and walk a few paces closer as he begins to sway again, this time dramatically. My mind begins to race. Is this a suicide situation? He's in a lot of danger. I want to take action and try and figure out how to help this poor guy. I'm just trying to figure out how to approach him, because I really don't want to startle him, but he's so close to the freaking edge. In fact, he's the furthest you can go, and his swaying was kind of a dance. Suddenly, after what seems to be ages, he stops and begins to take slow steps backwards, until he finally reaches a standing, and he goes back to being still, with his head slightly ajar staring forward, back under that spotlight. With my mind and heart racing, I return to my dark bench, sit down quietly, and try to process what's suddenly happening. I want to help this man, but I am overwhelmed by the alarms in my brain. I keep watching, being as silent as possible. He stands calmly for a few minutes under the light, facing the tracks, and safely several places from the edge. I decide to get help. I mean, he just did something crazy, really unnerving, and very dangerous. I don't know what his intentions are. I'm still sitting on my dark bench fighting off conflicting feelings, secretly watching, when he suddenly turns his entire body to face me, straight facing me, exactly where I'm sitting. He's smiling. He's far away, but so well lit. I can tell. He's obviously smiling, looking suddenly right at me. I'm completely startled. My jaw drops. My mind is now racing. He knows I'm here. He must know I'm here. But if he knows I'm here, why is he facing me? He knows exactly where I'm sitting. Is he actually blind? But I'm sitting in the dark, not making a sound. He's smiling. I froze solid. What happened next is so sudden that I remain basically frozen like a statue, sitting on the dark bench the entire time, not making even the slightest sound. Suddenly, still smiling, he turns and faces the train tracks, again using his cane. Suddenly, still smiling, he turns and faces the train tracks, walks right over to the very edge, and begins his side-to-side swaying, except this time it's in more of a dancing motion. He then changes position, putting one foot right on the edge, one foot behind him, and starts this exaggerated lunging motion. As if 1 second he's about to jump into the train, then he's not. Like he's catching himself before he does so. He does this repeatedly. All the while, I'm watching from a distance, basically in horror and confusion. Suddenly, he stops again and turns. This time, he doesn't face me, but faces in my general direction, my end of the track still smiling from what I can tell. He slowly begins to walk down the platform towards me. He's walking right on the edge, directly on the warning track the whole time. I hear the clank of his cane going along the side. He is so close to the edge that the cane is going into darkness. He gets closer and closer. I can't do anything but stare. How could he be walking so close to the edge? Why is he coming here? Closer and closer he gets. I can now see him better. He's still got that grin on his face. Empty. Like a game show host. And his eyes, they're slammed shut. They aren't gently closed. They're aggressively and exaggeratively closed very tight. I know though, that it's possible to peer a little down while making this face. My mind's exploding. I remain frozen solid. He is now so close. Only 20 feet away. I am thinking that if I just hang on one more minute, he's gonna walk by me. And with him out of the way of the entrance, I can run, get the help I need. Maybe he has an idea that I'm here. Maybe he really is blind, but greatly to my dismay, only about 15 feet before he reaches me, he stops, turns, faces me, gasping that smile. His eyes are slammed shut. He's facing directly at me. This can't be possible. It's like I'm in a surreal nightmare. Then it gets worse. He starts making this weird, high-pitched whimpering, moaning, feminine soft laugh. He reaches for his zipper while holding his cane. He then exposes himself while facing me. He starts jumping up and down, laughing with joy. He changes position and starts jumping from one foot to the other, like he's about to jump onto the train path. Except now, his movement is compromised. He continues his smiling with his eyes shut. All the while, I'm in this terrified state. Suddenly, I hear a train rattling loud and approaching fast. I'm frozen in horror. I'm both terrified but thankful that the train is coming. I then realize that I might be about to watch somebody commit suicide right in front of me, or accidentally get hit by the train. Right as the train reaches a platform, it starts slowing down. He returns to simply swaying, taking a step back. Being the very last train of the night, every car has people on it. I knew immediately, I'm probably safe. The train stops. I sprint like hell down the platform, a few cars distance down, and jump on. I don't know if he gets on the train too, or just stands there, but I definitely don't hear anyone yelling or anything. I assume he pulled up his pants either way. And so, once on the train, I sink into the seat. I go through everything and can't make any sense of it. Gratefully, I was able to make my way home safe without looking back for him. It's just so bizarre and weird. Even after all these years, it still terrifies me thinking of it. Anytime I'm down that way, I'm in disbelief of what happened and petrified that it's gonna happen again. A few years ago, I was leaving my grad school office late around 10 PM to catch a bus home. I walked from the university campus via relatively busy, well-lit streets to the main north-south road in my area. I was waiting for the bus at a shelter as it was the middle of winter, snowing and cold. The buses ran about every 15 minutes, so I was neither nervous nor scared, just patiently waiting. I was listening to music with my headphones in when I noticed a guy walk up to the shelter. I looked up at him briefly, do the little Canadian half smile of acknowledgement, and went back to listening to music. A few minutes passed. I could hear him talking about me. Well, I assume it's me. I was the only one around. I look up. He's staring directly at me, smiling a bit oddly, talking. I took out one of my headphones and said, "Excuse me." He just kept on smiling and blathering on, asking me about my day, the weather, etc. I don't know what it is about me, but I seem to be a people pleaser. I don't like confrontation. My main aim is to keep peace, so I answered a few of his questions politely and as non-pacifically as I could. He kept on blathering on and on. I was politely nodding. This goes on for about 10 minutes, and I just had this sinking feeling in my stomach. Something's a bit off about him, and it's making me nervous. After about 10 minutes, I could see the bus rolling up, which was a huge sigh of relief for me. No one else arrived at the bus stop. I could see at least 10 or 15 people on the bus, which is great. I get on the bus and sat near the front, and the guy sat across from me kept on smiling and trying to talk. I originally intended to head to my own home, which was west of the street I was on, but after this guy decided to be my personal parrot, screw it. I'm going to my boyfriend's instead. I was still getting uncomfortable from this guy, so I decided to push the stop a little early, just to see what the guy would do. The bus stop come at my request. The guy got up and didn't move. "Is this your stop too?" he said to me. "Oh no, I hit it early," I said to him. He went, "Oh, that's funny. I mixed it up too. It's not my stop either," and sat back down. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out. I hit the bus stop for the next stop and texted my boyfriend to come meet me. I got up to leave, and once it stopped, the guy followed me. I crossed the road. He's following me, still trying to talk to me, asking questions. Once I get to the other side of the road, I told him that I had to go because my boyfriend's meeting me. He looked really angry at this and I started running. I only made it about 15 steps away and I could hear him jogging after me. He was yelling all kinds of weird stuff at me. He jogged up to my level, still making the same smile, staring at me. I then rounded the corner and thankfully my boyfriend was there. After the creepy guy saw this, he literally sprinted off and I never saw him again. I'm a 30-year-old woman living in Texas. I've met my fair share of creeps, but what happened to me yesterday takes the cake. I don't drive, and I work in another city, so I take the bus to and from work, using mostly the same spots on a daily basis. I just started using public transport last year, so I'm mostly pretty comfortable with it by now, which makes yesterday's experience all the more unnerving. I had gone to the store after work for some soda, so I had a reusable bag with 2 litres in one hand and my purse in the other. Approaching the bus stop, I saw a woman sitting inside. It's one of the shelter types, and while I'm normally very shy and won't sit down if someone's in there, I considered it because I was feeling fairly sick and my feet were hurting after being on them all day. The idea quickly disappeared when I got closer and I could hear her muttering to herself. I did a quick glance over as I walked past. I could see she had bags spread out over the bench. Her shoes were off, so she's probably homeless. She's also muttering to herself, so I'm definitely on guard. I walk past the stop, maybe 2 yards away or so. Uncomfortable, I pull out my phone and begin to text my friend to tell her this, and I start noticing what she's saying. "Don't call me sweetie, I'll murder you." Okay, heckle's raised even more. Now I'm so curious I take a peek over and figure out it's probably not best to risk antagonizing her, as I don't want her attention to me. I keep messaging with my friend. The lady is muttering the entire time. She's saying things like, "Don't call me sweetie, don't call me honey," and stuff like that. She's saying some other stuff which I can't quite catch, but it sounded like, "I'll wrap my hands around your throat and kill you." At this point, I'm thinking maybe I should nope out of there, but the bus is set to arrive any minute, and even though the station's just down the street, I'm reluctant to try for it because I really just want to get home. Stupid, I know, but she hadn't done anything to make me think she'd even notice that I had existed. Around this time, I began to hear her saying words like fatty. She then says, "Your phone does not scare me." Clearly she's speaking about me or to me, since my phone's out. Just as I'm about to grab my bag, I look to the side, and she's now just outside the shelter. She's now staring at me with this look of hatred. Starts on again about how I've got to stop calling her things, and how that she's not gonna let God get between us, and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. I'm looking anywhere at this woman, completely terrified. She's constantly talking about murdering me, putting her hands around my neck. She sits back down, and I completely, idiotically, am froze to the spot. I feel like I don't even dare lean over. Also, this is taking place next to a very busy road that connects directly to a highway. This giving me a false sense of security. She keeps muttering. I slowly come to the conclusion my bus isn't coming, and I'm now near tears. She then gets up. She's much more agitated now. I'm completely terrified, the most scared I've been in my life. I see a man crossing the street, and he steps onto the sidewalk. I take a deep breath and hope for the best, lean over and grab my bag, and I nope the hell out of there, watching over my shoulder the entire way. I walk down to the next bus stop, and call the police, who immediately connect me to the right department. I tell them what happened, although my physical description isn't very good. As I told them, I hardly even glanced over at her, as I was worried that would provoke her to do something. Also, my brother lives in an apartment complex just down the road from that stop, and he told me that she'd been sleeping there for about a week. He had a minor encounter with her too, but kept on walking. She was gone the next morning, and that was the last that I ever saw of her. This happened to me about 7 years ago, when I just started high school. The school I was at was about a 10-minute walk away from my little brother's school, so every day I would walk up there to meet him. It was a pretty safe walk along a main road with lots of sunlight and cars, but not that many people most of the time. Occasionally, you would get some other school children or some runners and some odd people walking to their apartments. Of course, the people waiting at the bus stop too. The bus stop was halfway between my school and my brother's. There was only ever about 2 people waiting there. One afternoon, I was walking up to meet my brother, and I left my headphones at home that day, so I couldn't listen to music whilst walking. So, I was just walking and enjoying the sun and the plants. When I reached the bus stop, I noticed an old man sitting on the bench waiting for a bus. I passed him and didn't think much of it because he seems harmless. I'd say he's 60, pretty short and not very fit. As soon as I walked past him, I heard him get up. I didn't see a bus coming. Maybe he was checking the timetable, but no, of course not. I turned my head to check, and this guy is like 5 steps behind me, with his eyes stuck on me. I started to speed walk, but then I heard him speed up too. I looked behind me. Sure enough, he's speed walking as well. I was scared. He didn't take his eyes off me. Now, whenever I look back, he's given me this devilish grin. There was nobody else around. I was about 200 meters away from my brother's school. I decided to bolt it. I looked behind me, and the guy's now running. I could not believe it. He was faster than I thought he would be. Every time I glanced back, he's smiling. I was almost in tears. I was so scared I was not gonna make it. Now, I know you might think that a teenage girl could outrun a guy in his 60s, but I had a really heavy school bag and messed up my knee. By this point, I could see my brother's school and some kids leaving. I was kind of relieved and thought that the old man would ease up, but nah. He then starts yelling at me, "That's my granddaughter. She's running away from me. She's in trouble. Get her." All the while giving me an evil grin. I then stop because I've come to this massive road and don't want to get hit by a car. The guy gets close enough to grab my bag, telling me some profanities and how much he hates me, and that he was going to win and take me away. I scream and ran for my life, not caring about cars. I got into my brother's school and looked back to see the guy jogging towards me. I ran into the main building and told the receptionist everything. She went outside and pointed to a man waiting outside the school gate, moving his head around as if trying to find me. It was the same guy, and she told me to wait here before the cops come. The man walked away after about 10 minutes. The police did not catch him, but we found out that he'd been offering candy to kids from my brother's school and trying to get them to come home with him in the afternoons. I'm a 16-year-old guy. I wasn't expecting this to happen to me, so I just want to point out that this does not only happen to who you think it would. 2 days ago, I was coming back from school. For some background, the bus students goes to the centre of town. I take that one, and then I take another bus to get to my stop, where I have to walk maybe 200 or 300 meters away from my home. I took the bus from school towards the centre, then waited at my stop. There were other kids from other schools that waited, and the creep. He wore his hat down and was glancing at me every now and then. I ignored him by putting my earphones on. This lasted for 10 minutes, until the bus finally came. I forgot about the guy, but was still creeped out. I got on the bus, took an empty seat. I then noticed the creep get on the bus too. He was walking towards me. My red flags hadn't went off yet. He took a seat behind me, and then the bus started heading to the next stop. I heard something in the background of my music. I turned the volume down. I heard a voice behind me from this same guy. I pressed pause and heard him ask, "Hey, I think we live near each other. Can you tell me the stop which we're supposed to leave at?" Of course, you'd think it's stupid of me to tell the truth, but I'd feel like a bit of an idiot if I lied, but he actually did live near me. So, the bus stop is approaching. That is at 5 or 6 away from my place. I changed my seats, imitating as though I needed to get off the bus. The creep moved too. God, he's now lying and following me. I then waited for one of the busier stops, and God was with me because there was a crowd of teens, probably planning to drink and smoke. As soon as the doors opened, I ran away and crossed the road towards the entrance of a random shop. As soon as the students were separating, I looked for the creep. I can see him. He's now looking around everywhere for me. I took off my hoodie and put it in my bag. I then went to the bathroom to wet my hair. I tried to make myself look a little bit different and left the shop. I walked the long way towards the exit, making as many turns as possible. After walking a bit, I went to a small cafe and waited there. I sent a text to my dad if he could get me. He said why. I explained the whole thing. Luckily, he picked me up and drove me home. I don't know who the hell the guy was or what he planned. I hate how insistent he was in trying to get to me. I really don't think he lives near me. I really hope he doesn't. This happened around a decade ago. My family lived on one of the nicer neighbourhoods of my city, and unfortunately, muggings weren't uncommon, though to my knowledge at the time, none had resulted in anyone's death. I wasn't really following the neighbourhood news, or any news really. I could tell my mother was getting increasingly worried over the past few months. but I just didn't care enough to ask her why. She just kept on reminding me, lock all of the doors and watch over my shoulder, travel in groups, don't talk to strangers, and so on. The same thing that most responsible parents say to their kids. Now, our first fight about this happened when I was told I was not allowed to walk home from the train anymore. I was taking some ET lessons at the centre of the city and rode the train to the end of the line, which was in no way remote. Our apartment was about a 10-minute walk away from the station, and I had been doing that distance all my life. I could literally do it with my eyes closed. I usually walked around with my headphones on and my old, but much beloved CD player in my bag. While doing so, I always felt safe. Now there's lots of yelling and screaming like, "You still treat me like a child. Why don't you trust me? You're suffocating me, taking away my freedom," and whatnot. You get the idea. Eventually, we come to a compromise. As long as there were lights out, I could walk home. Otherwise, I'd give her a call and she would come and pick me up. I was fine with that, for the time. On that particular night, however, I was really, really angry. Don't ask me about what. Honestly, I don't remember the reason. I just remember the wrath. So I got off of the train, ignoring the heavy rain, and pretty much walked from the station straight home. On the outside, I must have looked like a normal 16-year-old listening to music hurrying home. But on the inside, I was preparing to crush my enemies. The way from the station to my home is pretty well lit, except for one turn. Back then, there's unkept hedges on both sides of the corner, one in front of the abandoned lot, and no street lights at all for about 100 foot. I approached the turn completely oblivious of my surroundings, initially planning my revenge against a yet unidentified foe, when someone jumps out of the bushes just next to the station wielding a large kitchen knife. Most of what follows I remember in a blur. I don't remember what he looked like. It was dark. He was wearing a hood. I remembered he smelled strongly of medicinal alcohol, but I honestly don't recall him saying anything. He probably didn't have any time to, because when he jumped out of the shadows, I was so startled that I dropped my Discman. And that was it. I saw red and completely lost it on the guy. All of the day's frustrations poured out of me like a dam break-in. I unleashed a torrent of swear words at him, most of which I made up on the spot. I completely ignored the knife. I was so angry, shoving him back hard, kept on screaming, "Are you kidding me?" over and over, and I then bent over to pick up my shattered CD player. I don't know what he did, and to this day, I don't know why he didn't attack me when I was crouched down, but I gathered my pieces, stood up. He was gone. Holding the pieces of my broken Discman and CD, I continued my march home, muttering a variation of "Great, just great, this is perfect. Why is my day getting even worse?" and occasionally turning around to yell "Screw you" at his general direction. When I got home, I got into another fight with my furious mum for not calling her, and made sure not to mention what happened because it would scare her. The gravity of it all hit me in the shower. After all the adrenaline died down, I began crying about my broken CD player. It all came crashing down to me 2 days later, when one of my neighbours was found stabbed in the lot behind the hedge where I was attacked. I didn't know her well. We went to Sunday school together, but my family and hers were neighbours for years. I overheard my mum talking on the phone about the serial killer that was making his rounds around the most difficult affluent parts of town, and how that this was the latest in a series of stabbings around the area. This story happened to me when I was around 11 or 12 years old. I was finally on summer break. Me and my best friend, who I met on the internet, made plans for me to stay at her place for a week. She lived in a city about 1 or 2 hours away from me, but I've met her in real life, so everything's fine. On that day, I took the train by myself, which was not a new experience to me since my mum let me have the freedom to travel. I texted my friend the time and place I'd arrive, but the city was so huge, so I got the name of the station wrong, which led to her going somewhere else instead of where I was. But at the time, I obviously didn't know, so when I arrived, I just took my suitcase and went to a quiet corner to wait for her while watching all the busy people run from A to B. My friend texted me, asking me where I was, and after some more texts, we figured out it was my fault for telling her the wrong station, but she was on her way to pick me up. After waiting a few minutes, a man in his 30s accidentally bumped into me, even though I was just standing still and apologized 1,000 times. I assured him that it was fine and nothing happened, but he insisted. He was really desperate to make it up to me and wanted to buy me a hot chocolate or something, at least go and grab a bite. I refused. I was very shy back then. He seemed to be very frustrated at this point, and decided just to grab my hand, trying to drag me along. Only then did I realize what his true intentions were. I was super afraid. No one else around me seemed to notice what was going on, but like a miracle, my friend just arrived on time and came straight up to me. I was calling her name. This made the guy realize that I wasn't alone. He took off as fast as he possibly could, and I never saw him again. I work downtown, standard 8 to 5 hours. Once in a while, I work overtime, but not very often, and not on the day that this happened. It was just a couple of minutes after 5 PM when I left work. It's just a few blocks from my office building to the train station. There are a few bars and back alleys along the walk, but the worst I've ever dealt with along these are only homeless people who get a bit aggressive wanting cash. They don't bother me. The train ride from the station downtown to the station where I park is about 40 minutes away. If I'm lucky, I manage to get a seat and not stand for the whole ride. On that day, I was lucky, more or less. I got a seat next to a window, which left the seat next to me open. At the next stop, 3 men got on. One of them sat next to me, and the other 2 sat on the seats across from me, so they were facing me. I was listening to music on my iPod, so I couldn't really hear them. I did notice, however, that the guy sitting next to me was trying to move closer to me on the seat. His leg was eventually touching mine. I'd scoot away from him, yet he'd move closer to me. Eventually, I was pressed right against the window and had no doubt that I had less than a few inches free space on the other side. I was wearing sunglasses and could just about glance at them. I'd noticed that they would occasionally say something, then all of them would look up at me. It was incredibly creepy and uncomfortable. I was nervous about getting off at my stop, but mine is the second to last on the train. So when the train pulled into my station, I got off. The guy next to me tried to grab my arm, but I was lucky I could move quickly to get out of the way. I was hoping they wouldn't get off the train there. It was a busy station. They couldn't have known where I'd parked. They did. I guess it was their luck that they'd targeted me. I park in the furthest lot from the station because the parking there is free. It's about a 7-minute walk, which isn't usually too bad, but lots tend to be pretty quiet, and I was really worried about these guys following me. For some background, I was fat. I work an office job, and I was sitting all day not working out. I was probably about 30 pounds overweight, and probably couldn't run for more than 30 seconds. Sad considering I used to run track and played hockey in high school. So I was crossing the bridge over the road from the station to the parking lots when I noticed 3 guys less than 10 feet behind me. I wasn't carrying a knife, nor pepper spray. It's illegal in my Canadian city. I know a little bit about personal protection though. Required from a girls' class at a private high school I went to. So I put my car key in between my fingers and my house key, so if I hit someone, it would hurt. At least a little bit. The guys followed me across the main lot. They never hid the fact that they were more nervous than I was. They laughed even louder now. I managed to get across the road between the lots before they got to the road. They had to wait a couple of cars to pass before they could cross. I was almost halfway across the road when they crossed. I began to run. I could hear their feet pounding on the pavement behind me. I used my clicker to unlock my car when I got close. I wrenched the door open, so glad no one was parked next to me. I had barely even closed my door and slammed the lock when they reached for my car. They were punching the windows, yelling. I've never been so afraid. I was worried they'd break the windows and get in. There was a guy at the back banging on the window so I couldn't reverse out of my spot. I was screaming. No one was there to hear me scream. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew that it was not good. I wished I had my screamer my mum had given me for protection, but it needed a new battery, so I never brought it with me. Then I thought about the screamer and realised I had a better idea. I sounded my car alarm. It was so incredibly loud that I thought I was about to go deaf. It had the reaction I wanted though. The guys started to back off. I saw people walking into the lot looking in the direction of my car. People could see what was going on. The guys took off back towards the train station. I drove home crying. I can't ever help but think what would have happened had they been able to cross the road at the same time as me, with the cars not in the way. To get back from my work, I used to have to pass a remote train station at night. I would get finished at about 7, and I'd be at the station at about 8. It was always empty, and outside. Dark around it too. One night while I was waiting there, I saw one other person at the end of the station. It was a woman, just outside of some of the lights, dressed in all black. At first I thought it was a guy, and got a bit worried they might be about to try something, but when I looked again, I realised they were female, and wasn't so worried. That's until I looked down at the floor again. I heard the most blood-curdling, terrifying scream of my life. As I looked up, all of the lights went out, except for one, the one where the woman was standing at. I looked around to see if anybody else had seen this, but the station was empty. With that, the lights come back on. The woman was nowhere to be seen. I actually went up to the end of the station to try and find her, looked around. She was nowhere to be seen. There was nowhere she could have ran off to or hidden at either, because the ground around it was all open. It's still the most unexplained and single most terrifying event of my entire life.